Raised by Writers, the stories that made us who we are.
Yes, welcome to our brand new podcast, Raised by Writers, the stories that make us who we are, looking at the wonderful world of children's stories and about how they stay with us throughout our lives. We've got a packed first episode for you. I'll be choosing a memory from my own bookshelf. We'll also be talking to Imogen Bond, Managing Director of EmpathyLab, and she'll be talking about choosing a book from the Read for Empathy collection. We speak to author Jo Cotterill. She'll be picking 3 books from her youth that have stayed with her throughout her life. And, of course, we'll be talking to some teachers. Rob Cooley will be choosing something from his own bookshelf. It's going to be a packed show. So every week, to kick us off, I'll be choosing something from my own bookshelf. And this is a book. It was first published in 1984. I think I probably read it around about 85, 86. So I'd have been about 7 or 8 at the time. It is Mr. Majeika by Humphrey Carpenter. It was published by Puffin. And it tells the story of a supply teacher who arrives in a very spectacular way because he arrives on a magic carpet. And of course, the class don't know what to make of this, particularly the class bully, Hamish Bigmore. He has a bit of a rough time, but then having said that, he is the class bully, so you'd expect him to have a bit of a rough time from a supply teacher. Class 3 go through the whole thing. There's various bits of traditional magic. There's various bits of things, certain bits of school dinners. Everyone getting chips instead of sandwiches. And Mr. Majeika is absolutely hilarious. I loved this book as a child. It's going back to it. You're surprised always about how quickly you can get through these books as an adult, and actually it still stirs up all the same things in you. And of course, I went on to become a teacher. So it was obviously from a very young age, I was looking to that classroom situation and thinking, you know what, I want something a little bit more sparkly and magical here. Maybe this is where drama teachers come from. So if you get the chance to get a copy of it and have a look through, it is Mr. Majeika by Humphrey Carpenter. And that's my recommendation for this first episode. And so we come to our first guest of the episode. And each week we are going to be on Raised by Writers. We're going to be talking about different books that are going to affect us in later life. And what better way to do that than to talk about reading for empathy, and particularly the children's book collection from EmpathyLab. And I'm delighted to be joined by Managing Director Imogen Bond. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, all right.
And look, the Read for Empathy collection has been set up for a number of years, looking at those brilliant empathy skills of perspective taking and emotional vocabulary and all the things that children need to kind of set themselves up in life. And there's some amazing stories in the Read for Empathy collection, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource. I mean, it's been going since about 2017, but every year it has grown year on year. And so this last year in 2025, we've got 70 empathy-rich books within that collection, 30 that are for primary age group and 40 that are for primary age group and 30 that are for secondary ages. And it's diverse in every possible way that you can imagine, from theme, genre, writer, lived experience. All the different kinds of diversity that you could possibly imagine are in there. There really is an empathy story for everybody, and also a brilliant way to explore lives and experiences that you might not ever get the opportunity to explore in real life as well. So I would urge families to have a look at it, but also schools, libraries to really embrace the collection every year when it comes out newly in February, and take a look what's on offer from it.
And that's something that previously, when I was growing up at school, there wasn't that diversity of authors. There wasn't that diversity of voices coming through. There certainly wasn't, a wide range of children's literature. I think we live in a golden age now of kids lit. And you've chosen one of those books to talk about. And I'm delighted that you've chosen our first picture book of the series. So let's, which book have you chosen?
I've chosen April's Garden, and I am a massive picture book fan, I have to say. Even pre-EmpathyLab, I I was always an avid reader of picture books, in part because I spent quite a lot of time looking for great picture books as a theatre director to transform into productions for young people. And they are such an amazing, like, artworks in themselves, through the illustration, through the kind of cleverness with which they're put together, but also they are so unbelievably complex and nuanced, and they deal with incredible themes, themes that perhaps you might not think are relevant to young children, but actually are really, really relevant to everybody's lives, that they deal with them in such a kind of instant way of unpacking kind of the complexities of life. And April's Garden, that's why I like April's Garden so much, because it feels like maybe a part of life that not so many people get to explore. It's about a young girl who's probably had to, we don't really find out what's happened to her, but she's probably had to go with her mum to a women's refuge in the middle of the night. We don't know why that's happened, but that's sort of what's insinuated. It's not something that I've ever had personal experience of, but through this story, I can start to understand a little bit of what it might feel like to be taken away from everything that I know in the middle of the night and have to start again. So it's a great, like all picture books, I think it has a brilliant way into something that's very complex and nuanced. And the tragedy and comedy of life are always very close to each other. And they really are in this picture book as well. So that's one of the reasons that I like it so much.
And that's something that as educators as well. I mean, I'm a former teacher. You're a former theatre director and worked in education. And that, when we're working with young people, having things that are outside our lived experience is so important, because they're going to experience things that we would never have even dreamed of because of our particular upbringing.
Yeah, that's true. And I also think you never know what people have been through as a teacher, you might have an understanding of the background of the children that are in your class, but maybe not everything will have been disclosed. And so it's important, I think, that children, anybody, sees themselves reflected in books, but also can find a way into those stories that are more familiar to them, that opens up a new kind of perspective on the world for them. So there is that thing that's often said, isn't there, that books are windows and mirrors. And I think that is really true. Both things are really important, because to understand ourselves and the world around us a bit better, we need to see ourselves reflected, but we also need to explore the other lives that we don't get to live as well.
Absolutely brilliant choice. I've read April's Garden as well, and I share your love of picture books. I'm behind me in the office here. There's an awful lot of picture books, and sometimes you just want to just sort of take them down off the shelf, while you're having your coffee break, and just go, I'll just have a flick through that. And you suddenly find yourself uplifted by them, don't you?
Yeah, uplifted, moved. I think they're the kind of instant way to my heart is a picture book. So I'm always keen. I can go and stand in bookshops or libraries for hours and just read thousands of picture books. And I always get asked when I'm doing that who I'm buying them for or who I'm borrowing them for, and the answer is always me. But also to I give a lot away as gifts. Like all of my friends who have children all get books as gifts, and picture books right the way through, from all ages. I think it's really important that we keep on reading picture books.
Indeed. Imogen Bond, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's delightful to chat with you.
And so to the meat or the cheese or the salad, depending on your preferences in this particular sandwich, we are coming to our guest today. Now, if the internet is to be believed, my guest has been a newspaper seller at one point or another, a music and drama teacher. They have been an actor before becoming a full-time writer. Their early works include A Storm of Strawberries, A Library of Lemons, Jelly. There was a lot of food-based references in early stuff from my guest today. And, of course, she is the co-author of the Starlight Stables Gang collection alongside Esme Higgs. My guest today is Jo Cotterill. Hello, Jo. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm really well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and welcome to a brand new podcast. Now we are talking about children's books, but particularly books that we read as children. Now, of course, when we speak to different authors, we're going to speak to people from different generations. We're going to speak to people that maybe read books back in the 40s or 50s. Or when were you your kind of like reading peak, as it were?
80s would have been the 80s.
Yeah,
I'm born in 76, and I actually learned to read at the age of 3.
right.
I was what they would now call hyperlexic, which I don't think is particularly helpful for anything else in life. But it just
It sounds good though.
it does sound great, doesn't it? And apparently, at the age of 2, I used the magnetic letters on the fridge to spell out "Who will I be?" Which
Wow.
my mum finds is absolutely true, and she sent me, photographic evidence of my writing my name at the age of just under 3. Yes, I was really very. I was surrounded by books anyway because I grew up in a house of books. So, but I would have said my prime reading period would have been, the 80s. Yeah, pretty much
And
that decade.
And from that, I mean, aside from the fact I need to add philosopher to your list of previous jobs that I've been reading, who will she be? We'll find out at the end of this. Now, look, I obviously said I've started to guess that you can choose 3 books that we're going to talk about. That was quite a tricky thing, and you've already in our pre-interview sort of talked about 9 other books that I could have talked about this and that. It is impossible, isn't it?
It is impossible. And I think one of the things I've had to learn over the years is when people say to you, what was your favourite children's book growing up? You don't have to spend years agonising over that. You can just pick one that you really liked. It's okay. No one's going to know that this isn't necessarily the book that defined your life. So yes, it was very difficult to narrow it down. And I went through my bookshelves going, oh, and this one. Oh, and this one. And this one. So yeah. But
yeah, you end up doing a World Cup of your own childhood.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, that brings me then. Your first choice. Now, look, you've chosen a classic, haven't you? I mean, this is if you haven't heard of this book, then you've probably been sleeping on another planet forever. So, what have you gone for?
So, I have chosen Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. And I think I must have read this book when I was about maybe 8, something like that. I was certainly still at primary school. And I remember instantly bonding with Anne Shirley. She has a very strong sense of justice. She's incredibly idealistic and romantic, but also recognises that she doesn't always get things right. And when she gets things wrong, they affect her so deeply. She goes into terrible sort of depressive stages of not being able to speak and not being able to communicate with people, and she has huge dreams, not just in terms of what she wants to be as a person and what she wants to do in life, but also of more sort of materialistic things, like she wants a pretty dress with puffed sleeves. It's like she's very much a product of her time, but also has this mind that runs on. And I was just before this interview, I was just skimming the first few pages, and where she meets Matthew Cuthbert for the first time, and he picks her up from the station. He's expecting her to be a boy. They want to take on an orphan. And instead, they've been sent Anne Shirley, who is definitely not what Matthew and Marilla, brother and sister, want for their farm. And she just does not stop talking. She talks in enormous paragraphs of these streams of consciousness. And I think I loved the way she just said whatever she was thinking. We would look back on that now from the modern frame and go, clearly neurodivergent, hyper-focused, gets hyper-fixated on things, strong sense of moral justice, social justice, all sorts of autistic ADHD traits in there, gets passionate about things, and when she's determined on something, it's really hard to sway her to another direction. And
have you ever come across anyone like that in your life, Jo?
I think I read this book and went, Oh, okay. This is me. This is how I feel about things. And I was incredibly, very much like Anne at that age, I found the real world quite prosaic, quite tedious, exhausting, confusing. I wanted things to be grander and bigger and more magical. And that's what Anne wants as well. Wherever she looks, she sees possibilities and beauty, and she encourages people to, examine flowers and, tea parties. Because they can mean so much more. So she sort of imbues the world around her with this extra importance. And I feel like that's what I was trying to do as a child as well, because I found I really wanted to live in an alternative version of our real world, which is, I suppose, I still really am trying to create alternative versions of our real world, because there's so much that can be improved in the real world. And that's
is that her world. You're almost it's like you saw a character trait for yourself, but in a world that was way past and very different, right down to the fashion you were talking about there and what she wants as a dress and all of those things. That's very removed from the 80s childhood that you were talking about.
Yes.
And yet that character trait continues all the way through.
Yes, and I think that's why these books are classics, isn't it? That's why we find classics, because the characters in them, that they're human. They don't change. Humanity doesn't change. The things that we do around us, the societies we build, they often change. But what makes us human, that's always the same, whether you're in the 1700s or the 1900s or 2025. People are still going to identify and recognise human traits in these characters. So even though Anne was, in Prince Edward Island, which I've never visited, but I would really love to.
Yeah.
I felt like I knew her. I felt like I understood her. And then of course they did turn it into this wonderful TV series, Canadian series, with this amazing young woman playing Anne, and I just fell in love with them all over again. And also Gilbert Blythe was kind of my first fictional crush.
Oh, okay.
I thought he was, he was brainy. I love the fact that he teased Anne. She was angry with him, and he apologized afterwards, and he recognized that he had really upset her on a deep level, and he kept trying to make it up to her. And obviously it did eventually in the end up together, which was so lovely and just, satisfied my romantic heart.
It is true. We formed these bonds. I mean, I genuinely wanted to be friends with Huckleberry Finn when I was growing up. He looked like a great guy. I just he would be my mate if he was around.
Yep. I suspect though, if Anne and I got together, no one would be able to get a word in edgeways.
I was going to say it would be like a tennis match verbally between the two of them.
We would talk over each other so much. Yeah.
Well, it's that is a perfect place to start, based within a classic. But then you've chosen as your second book a title I'd not heard of until you spoke about it, and I'm fascinated to hear you share the story of Ordinary People.
Yeah, so this is The Ordinary Princess.
Ordinary Princess.
MMK. And first of all, I always loved the cover. That's a beautiful illustration. There's a girl in a long, flowing purple dress. I've always been drawn to the medieval style of fashion. I always think it's very elegant. I mean, totally impractical. Those long drapey sleeves, they would fall in everything. What I particularly love, first of all, this is a very slim book. It's a very short story. And MMK is known for things like The Far Pavilions, much longer historical fiction for adults. But this is a children's book. And it's the story of a princess, and she is born into a royal family that already has a number of princesses. I can't remember how many. And they're all called, Sapphire and Pearl and things like that. That appealed to me as well. I liked that. And when she's born, she's called Amethyst, or Amy for short.
Of course. Yeah, Amethyst. Hello.
Amethyst, yes. Amethyst. The king and queen decide to have a big royal christening, and the queen and all the courtiers want to invite all the fairies in the land to, do this. It's a classic fairy tale.
You do, yeah.
The king is very against this. He says no good will come of this. You know, he says he's descended from Sleeping Beauty, and so he knows what trouble fairies at christenings can cause. So he's very cross about this, and he's overruled by the queen and the courtiers. And he's proved right because one of the fairies, she is invited, but she's cross because she's been held up in traffic on the way there. So it says here, the last and most important of the fairy godmothers had arrived late because of a traffic block on the road to the palace. Her name was Crustacea, and she was the fairy in charge of water, which means that she was the head fairy of all the seas, ponds, pools, lakes and rivers. She was very old and rather deaf, and her temper was always inclined to be a little uncertain when she was on dry land. But for all that, she was a very powerful and important lady, and all the guests made way for her as she hobbled up to the cradle. So she gets to the princess, and all the other fairies have now... She's the last one.
Right.
And all the other fairies have given this baby wit, charm, courage, health, wisdom, you know, all those kind of things. And she decides to do something completely out of the ordinary. She raised her twisty coral stick and waved it 3 times over the cradle of the 7th princess. "My child," said the fairy Crustacea, "I am going to give you something that will probably bring you more happiness than all these fal-lals and fripperies put together. You shall be ordinary."
Oh,
and
dear.
And then the baby starts crying. And of course, it's the first time that this angelic princess has started crying, and everyone's like, "Oh my goodness," and she screws up her face. And as she gets older, her nose sort of turns up at the end. She develops freckles.
Okay.
She becomes less classically beautiful than her sisters, and she really likes climbing trees, which is a very unprincess-like behaviour. And the family is really quite embarrassed by her. But so they sort of forget about her for a little while. I mean, she's got a governess, she lives in a tower, she's allowed to roam around as long as she doesn't cause trouble. And then she gets to an age where all her older sisters have been married off, and it's her turn. And she's like, "Well, I don't want to get married." And they say, "Well, you have to get married." And they have great trouble marrying her off because the princes who come and look at her say, "Goodness, she's not like the sort of princess I was expecting. She doesn't look anything like her beautiful sisters." And she's so cross about it all that she decides to run away, and she builds herself a cabin in the forest and makes friends with a squirrel and
this is the delight of children's literature, and then they make friends with a squirrel, and this sounds perfectly normal.
Squirrel and bird, yes. I mean, I should point out the squirrel and the bird don't speak, but she gives them names like Mr. Pemberley or something, which is just great. And then eventually she realises that she's going to need better clothes, and for that she needs money, so she goes to get a job in the neighbouring kingdom as a scullery maid.
Okay.
How
very ordinary.
How very ordinary, exactly. And one time when she's there, she happens to be clearing after this big banquet, and she finds this young man sitting there, swinging his legs, eating ice cream on the table. And they have a chat, and he says he's a footman or something, and she introduces herself as, the scullery maid, and they have a nice chat. And then they start sneaking out together to the forest on their days off. And then it turns out he is actually the prince. So they've both been lying about their identities, and they do eventually fall in love and get married at the end. But what I loved about her was that she was very independent. She saw the way her life was going. She did not like it. She chose to do something about it. And she was not afraid of hard work. She wasn't expecting to be given things. She was like, "I need a job." Okay, clearly I need to go and find a job. So she did. And then she started working, and it was really hard work, and she was very tired. But she didn't complain about it. She knew she was really lucky because she had this wonderful place in the woods that she loved. And I just found the whole thing utterly enchanting, and the way it's written is a very modern way of writing a fairy tale. The style of writing is not classically fairy tale. It's very practical. And that really appealed to me.
Yeah, it takes those elements, though, doesn't it? It's almost like, going forward a lot in time. You look at the world of Shrek, for example, and it's fairy tales, but actually they've got human twist and the reflection of time, and we pick apart the fairy tale a little bit. I'm fascinated by that. Both books so far have been young girls who are, I would say, in a kind of classical sense, very elegant and very princessy in both their own ways. And both of them have subverted that. And this is the leading question, I suppose, for the whole of this podcast, is do you think that the books leaned you towards that way, or were you drawn to the books because that was the kind of characters you wanted to identify with? Do you think that they had an effect on how you thought, or were you just simply going, you know what, that's me, I want to read about these sorts of people? Yeah, and this is the, I posed that question, and then we have radio silence, which is fantastic podcast.
Sorry about that.
Because you're bamboozling your guests, Paul.
I think it's very chicken and egg, isn't it? I don't know whether. I think I must have been drawn to them because I saw something in those characters that I recognised, but also that I wanted to be, that I wanted to develop. I have always been, my parents used to read me the Just So stories when I was a child, along with all sorts of other things, from Ivor the Engine to the Odyssey. It's like a really strange combination of things that I had growing up.
The journey.
But one of the Just So stories is the cat who walks by himself. My mum has always claimed that I am the cat who walks by herself. And I really like to make choices for myself. I like to feel that I have autonomy over my life, and I think that's what has drawn me to characters who behave in similar ways and who also want to control their lives. So I think that's definitely what has drawn me to those.
Have you read any of the books since we've sort of started talking about? Have you delved back into it and had that little moment of I remember reading this the first time round, and some of those feelings stirred up again?
I did. So I read The Ordinary Princess to both my children at some point. And I remember being pleasantly surprised how much I still loved that story. I haven't read Anne of Green Gables for a while, but a lot of what she and the way that story is created found its way into my book, A Library of Lemons, which does reference Anne of Green Gables. There's a moment where the characters in it are trying to play Lady of Shalott, and that, of course, is what Anne does in the book. I haven't. I don't reread them a lot. I suppose maybe in some ways I want to kind of preserve that nostalgic. Yeah, maybe I should. I bet they'll be just as good second time, third, fourth, fifth time. However many times I read them as a child, I don't know. You've probably got the same as me, broken spines all over the shop when it comes to the books you had. Pages falling out.
Yeah, I've had
especially in my final book.
Oh,
and in my final book.
Now look, that's a segue and a half.
That leads me on nicely.
So go on, let's delve into that third choice.
So my final book is called The Swish of the Curtain, and it's by Pamela Brown, and this one definitely is falling apart. I don't suppose I had this new. I think this must have been secondhand by the time. In fact, look, the pages are actually falling out at the back. This is the story of a group of children, teenagers, although you wouldn't know it from the front cover, which is the BBC adaptation, where everybody looks about 25.
There were no child actors in those days.
No, I think maybe that was the problem. But it's this story of 7 young people, shall we say. There's a brother and a sister, and they've got friends, and they come across a dilapidated theatre. It's been abandoned, it's been overgrown, nobody cares about it, and in fact most people seem to have forgotten that it's there. And these children are very theatrical interested. They are driven mainly by a girl called Lynette. And actually, when I was obsessed with this book as a child, I wanted to change my name to Lynette because I thought it was a much nicer name than Joanna. Because in fact, when I was growing up, everybody was called Joanna. It was an awful lot of Joannas and Claires and Helens and
Talk to me about it. I hear you. I'm a Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, there were 900
you're a Paul.
of us.
Yes, exactly. Everybody was called Paul. Yes, quite. Oh, Jason. There were a lot of Jasons around as well.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to be Lynette. Lynette had dreams of being an actress when she grew up. She wanted to go to drama school. She was constantly learning bits of plays and looking for opportunities to be in things. And these children somehow wangle it that they get a sort of temporary ownership, really, management of this theatre. And so they put in an awful lot of work doing it up, repainting it, getting somebody in to fix the electricals, and then they start putting on shows in their theatre, which they call the Blue Door Theatre because it has a blue door. And I was a very theatrical child growing up. Theatre has always been the place that I feel most excited. I get a real buzz from being in theatre. And as a child, I was doing ballet and tap, and I went to drama groups, and I sang in choirs. And then when I was old enough, there was sort of lots of drama productions and things. And also I played lots of instruments. I played the violin and the piano and the flute. I had lessons on all of these things repeatedly, and I do look back now and go to my poor parents taxing me around.
It's like a performing arts college in your own house.
Exactly. Yes. And so I was drawn to this story because these kids didn't just dream it; they did it. Very much like the Ordinary Princess. They found a theatre. They knew what they wanted to do. They knew they would have to work really hard. They knew they would have to persuade people. There are disappointments along the way. There are, wardrobe malfunctions. There are bits where they're doing a scene and one of the kids forgets their lines and they go round and round in circles. And I have actually been in shows where that has happened. And you just loop a page.
Oh, yes. Loop a page, skip a page, go back 2 pages.
Skip a page. Yep. So it was very much sort of solidified in me that I wanted that to be my life. I wanted a career in theatre. And so this was, I also read there was a series about ballet at Sadler's Wells, A Dream of Sadler's Wells and Masquerade at the Wells. And that was all about a ballet dancer. And I devoured those books as well. But this one I particularly liked because it was everything. Within the group of kids, there was Lynette, who wanted to basically be Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. And there was Maddie, the youngest, who was a bit sort of clumsy and the childish one of the group, but who really liked having a go at everything. And then there was sort of there was Nigel, who was the oldest boy, who was a bit pompous but actually very good, but then got terribly tongue-tied when he had to play Romeo. And there was a boy called Bulldog, because, of course, boys have these crazy names. I can't even remember why he was called Bulldog, but he was obsessed with the technical side of things. And he spends most of the book trying to figure out how to make the curtains of the theatre go swish. Because he wants, so that's hence the title, The Swish of the Curtain. And that's his kind of obsession. He tries lots of different ways to try and get the curtains to sort of swoosh down into this wonderful sort of velvet waterfall. And when he finally achieves it, everyone's like, "Oh, you did it!" And one of the girls in the group is very good at sewing, and she likes all the costumes. So they were kind of like the perfect little theatre company. And that really appealed to me. Plus, there are lots of references to things like Shakespeare plays that I already knew or that I really loved. So, it's that along with the film of Labyrinth, starring Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie. Those two things probably set me on my path to theatre, which is what I did. I went into performing arts at uni, and then I spent 5-6 years working for theatre companies as an actor and a musician. So, I do trace some of my career path back to books like Swish of the Curtain.
And it's really funny that because we're of a similar age in terms of when we were sort of reading books, and I haven't read the book, but I do recognise from the cover of the book you showed me the TV series, and I have a vague recollection of that that series myself. And of course, I also went into performing arts, and it was about that age. I was about 8, and I was like, "Oh, well, this is the sort of thing that it was being given to me as a diet." Labyrinth, the same. I was about 8 or 10 when Labyrinth came out. You do take these things in and say, you know what, those people they've put in front of me on a screen or in a book or a piece of music that you listen to, that's where I want to go. That's what it becomes that role model, those goals that you set for yourself. And of course, from your point of view, absolutely fantastic. They achieved exactly that. You did go into performing arts and creating new things for other people. It's the artist cycle, I suppose. We see it. We learn from it. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We steal a little bit of their stuff, and then we recreate our own.
Which is why when people do talk about you can't be what you can't see, I so believe in that. Because for me, I saw Jennifer Connelly, who was only 14 when they made Labyrinth, and I was around about the same age, and I went, oh my gosh, I want what she does. I never made it to Hollywood, sadly, but that's what sort of propelled me, and I think it's so important that the kids do get those opportunities to see, as you know now in the world of children's books, we quite often are looking to create stories that show children what they can be, especially children who might not otherwise see those types of characters, whether they are from cultural minorities or whether they are disabled in some way, those children that might not have seen anyone doing something amazing, and it's extraordinary the effect that one book, one film, one chance encounter has on the direction of your life.
And same example, you looked at Labyrinth and went, I want to be Jennifer Connelly. I looked at Labyrinth and went, I want to work with Muppets if I can. And if I ever get the chance, that's still the dream. If I ever get the chance to work with the Muppets in any shape or form, I'm there.
Yes. Even if it's just background in one scene.
That's absolutely fine.
Above your head.
I'm just strolling down Sesame Street or something. That would be fine for me. And so the question, what is it you're working on next?
So we, Esme and I, who write the Starlight Stables Gang books together, we have already done 3 books in the series, and our 4th book, which is called The Pony Whisperer, will be out in October, and it's the story of Daniel, who is the 4th and final member of the Starlight Stables Gang and the only boy. And I am so proud of the story that we've created. I think it covers a lot of really important things, but also is a really good plot, and I'm hoping that everyone will enjoy it. So that is The Pony Whisperer, and it'll be out in October.
Brilliant. And I love a title that the kind of the adults will also go, oh, wasn't there a film, The Horse Whisperer, at some point? Kids are going, The Pony Whisperer. It sounds like, and the parents are going, oh, we'll buy that one for you. That's very clever. I like it. Jo Cotterill, your choices of Anne of Green Gables, The Ordinary Princess, and The Swish of the Curtain are the first to make it to our bookshelf here on the podcast. So thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It was fantastic talking to Jo. What great choices. Now, authors, of course, are not the only people that read books when they were children. Of course, the people that teach us were doing exactly the same. And our first guest as a teacher is Mr. Robert Cooley from Bury, recently retired, and he's chosen an absolute cracker of a book.
I'm sitting here as a now retired primary school teacher, reminiscing about a book I first read almost 50 years ago. At the end of what we now call Year 4, as a reward for a 100% attendance, I was presented with the book I want to share. Bill Norton's The Goalkeeper's Revenge and Other Stories. The stories in the book are primarily set in the industrial Lancashire of Bill Norton's formative years, a world that has long since gone. But no matter, because the narratives of all the stories are character-driven. Sim Dault, the book's titular goalkeeper, and his nemesis Bob Thropper, Spit Nolan and his last ill-fated trolley race. The list goes on. The binding of my original puffin paperback came apart before my own school days were over and the bundle of loose pages thrown out. However, when I became a teacher myself, I bought a new copy. A copy I still have and from which I've read to various classes down the years. I've just reread some of the stories and they still resonate with me. Norton writes wonderful vignettes of a now bygone northern working class life, but his themes are timeless. Stories of resilience and childhood friendship, of loss and living with the consequences of one's actions. Stories told with humour and pathos. A book first published in the 1960s with stories set in the 30s, yet a book that every child, and particularly boys, of 2025 should read and hopefully cherish for a lifetime, just as I have done.
And there you go. Quick as a flash, we find ourselves coming towards the end of our first episode. Thank you so much for joining us. The books we've been talking about today, Mr. Majeika by Humphrey Carpenter, April's Garden by Isla McGuckin and illustrated by Catalina Echeverri, Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Montgomery, The Ordinary Princess, MMK, The Swish of the Curtain, Pamela Brown, and then Rob Cooley's choice there at the end, The Goalkeeper's Revenge and Other Stories by Bill Norton. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be back with you next time with another great children's author who was raised by writers.
If you'd like more information on today's podcast, you can contact Paul Jenkins on social media using the handle @TeacherWriterPJ. Raised by Writers is a Double Rainbow production.